Hello, welcome back to another of these videos I'm doing on folklore and symbolism of Northern European trees and plants. So this time we're looking at the yew tree. Now first of all, I'll just say it's been a while since I last posted a video. My last one was way back at the beginning of the year with birch, the very beginning of the Ogham so-called Druidic Tree Alphabet. The reason I haven't been posting any videos is because shortly after I made that video, my own mum passed away quite suddenly, and it was a bit of a shock. And I've been on quite a journey since then, and haven't really been in the mood for making so many videos. But I've decided to come back and start making them again now for you guys. And what better tree now than the yew tree, which is actually the very end of the Druidic Tree Alphabet. There's 20 letters in total. It begins with birch and ends in yew. And that's a fitting tree for today because today is Samhain, Halloween, Day of the Dead. And because of what's happened to me this year, I thought I needed to spend some time with the yew tree because this is a tree of death, of endings, but also of rebirth, because it's not linear, it's a cyclical thing. So birth comes next in the cycle of the tree alphabet. So death, rebirth, transformation, change. It's a bit like the tarot death card, if you're familiar with that. Also eternity, immortality, everlasting life, communication with the dead and the spirits of the other world, the great unknown, the void, and bringing wisdom back from the other side, or magical power. It's a very, very sacred tree for you, and has been for millennia in this country and in other parts of Europe as well. So, why is it the tree of death? Well, the obvious first, it'll kill you. It's highly toxic. The spines, the leaves are toxic. The bark is toxic. The berries here, they're actually a bit less toxic, but the seeds inside, they're very toxic. So pretty high on the toxicity rating. In fact, the English word toxic comes from the Latin name of this tree, Taxus. So it is very poisonous. Other associations with death, of course, and famously the Welsh and English longbow were all made out of this tree. It's because of the heartwood and the sapwood have very different properties, hold a lot of tension, so very good for making longbows out of a single piece of wood. And the longbow, of course, was the deadliest weapon on the European battlefield for centuries. Many, many brave knights would have lost their lives. Agincourt and the vasty fields of France. So in a way, it's the great leveller. You know, even a peasant with a longbow can bring down a great knight. That's sort of quite a good metaphor for death, I think. Robin Hood as well, of course, another great leveller, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. He would have had a longbow of yew. Little John had a staff of yew. So it's embedded in the folklore. Other associations with death and eternal life with this tree, of course, are that it's usually found in graveyards in this country and in other countries in Europe. And that's a very, very interesting thing. It's like many pagan things, it's very much been co-opted by Christian culture. So it's sort of, it stands for everlasting life now in Christian communities. I think the berries stand for the blood of Christ, a bit like the holly bush. So it's been very Christianized. So it's also a tree of sacrifice, which will be interesting in a story I'm going to tell you a bit later about Odin and this tree. You might know the story I mean. So the interesting thing concerning graveyards and this tree is they're so long-lived, this tree. That's why it's a symbol of eternity and and time and never-ending time, beginningless and endless time. Uh, just because it's so long-lived and usually predates any church it's built on. This isn't a particularly old church, it's a Norman church built on an Anglo-Saxon church. This is my village church, by the way. My mum was, she had her funeral here. She's not buried here, she's buried down on our family farm at the bottom of the hill. But almost certainly there would have been a sacred site here before that any predecessor to that church was ever built, and there would have been yew trees here. I remember once I was living in the woods by Runnymede, near where Magna Carta was signed. I was living in a sort of eco community there for a time, and I remember swimming across the River Thames one day to an island on the sort of far bank, and I found this ruined church and this big old yew tree. I since know it's a famous yew tree. It's called the Ankerwick yew, probably about 2,000 years old. Magna Carta might have been signed underneath it. Anyway, there's this ruins of a Norman church, probably about 1,000-year-old church, probably been ruined for hundreds of years, and then this old hollow yew tree next to it, and it just landed on me that this yew tree would have been there before that church was even built, and now that church was in ruins. That's just quite a potent symbol for me personally of the timelessness of these trees, and this is obviously quite a young one here. One of the oldest trees in the world, certainly in Europe, is in Scotland. It's about 5 to 9,000 possibly years old. It's difficult to age yew trees because, and here's a funny thing about them, the insides tend to rot away. So when they get older and older, you can't date them by the tree rings. They just get bigger and bigger, and then the inside rots away, and new trees sprout out of the sort of root mass of the original tree. So it's sort of like it's almost a symbol of rebirth, of reincarnation. Also, the branches are very peculiar, not on this tree, but on very old ones. Sometimes the branches dive down and touch the ground, and they root into the ground, and then a new tree grows out, and it keeps on happening in this kind of undulating pattern. So it's a really potent symbol for rebirth. Think of all these lives just sprouting into the living world, and then into the underworld, and then into the living world. And this is a very recurring theme in Celtic mythology. There's lots of myths and legends about people becoming animals and humans and animals again. But that's one thing we do know about ancient Celtic belief. They did believe in rebirth, the transmigration of the soul, if you like. And this tree is very much a symbol of that because it's beginningless and just keeps regrowing. I mean, obviously, it does have a beginning, but you know, it's older than many civilizations. So you can see why ancient people thought they might have been eternal trees. Just as a side note, as well as sort of Celtic and Germanic and English and Northern European paganism, I used to be very interested in Buddhism, and I sometimes find the Celtic and Buddhist worldview sometimes have some parallels. And one of these ideas is the idea of rebirth. And because these yew trees grow out in concentric circles, it's almost like the great wheel of rebirth itself. But it's empty at the center. Like I say, the center rots away. So it's almost in Buddhism the concept of voidness. So I sometimes wonder, was the Celtic concept of rebirth a bit like the Buddhist one? Like, is there nothing actually reborn? Is it just illusory, or is there an actual soul that is reclothed, more like in ancient Greek or early Christian or Hindu concepts of reincarnation? Anyway, that's just something that I like to think about sometimes. So, Tree of Death and Rebirth, very, very sacred to the ancient Celts and before. So quite often, that tree I spoke about in Scotland, the Fortinall Yew, I think it's called, that is on the site of an Iron Age sacred site, including many burial mounds. So it was sacred to the Iron Age Celts as a tree of death and a tree of the ancestors. We know that from the archaeological evidence, and that's been carried on even to the to the Christian culture as well here. Although I think if the Puritans knew about its pagan associations, they probably would have cut them all down in the Civil War. But hey, so this tree, another image and this is from Celtic folklore associated with this tree and graveyards, is that the roots of this tree stretch into every mouth of every corpse buried in the graveyard. And as an image, that is just, I just love that image because it's really visceral that every dead body in this graveyard under the ground has a root from this yew tree growing out of it. So it's a way for the dead to speak. So you commune with this living being, but it has its fingers in all the bodies of the dead. So it's just the perfect symbol of a tree of the dead, of communion with the ancestors and the underworld. It's an underworld tree. In Roman and Greek mythology, gods like, Saturn, Hades, Pluto, they would all be associated with this tree. Underworld deities, chaperones of the dead. This tree is also obviously associated with Odin as well. More about that later. Yeah, this tree also is one of the contenders for the World Tree. In Norse mythology, sometimes that's the that's the ash tree, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that originally in Germanic and Norse and probably British and Irish mythology, the original world tree would have been the yew tree, and it makes sense. It's the oldest tree, and the idea of the um, three-parted world, the heavenly realm above. So it's a shamanic thing, really. Originally, the middle world, human world in the middle, this day-to-day existence of ours, and underneath, where the roots of the tree grow, the underworld, where all the bodies of the dead are, where hell is, not fire and brimstone hell, sort of shadowy Hades type hell. So this is another tree which has its associations in Ogham. Like I said, it's the last tree of the Ogham alphabet. Ioho, I think it's pronounced, but basically the letter I, and yeah, symbolizing transformation, death and rebirth, and communication with the ancestors. It also means a very similar thing in the Germanic Fuduk script. Um, this is the Elder Fuduk here, and this is the Eiwaz rune. Symbolizes a very, very similar thing. This is the Yew Tree rune. The yew tree is very important for divination. A lot of times, Ogham sticks like this, you would have entire sets made out of just yew. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm making, the birch rune out of birch, the yew rune out of yew, just because I like the idea of doing that. But traditionally, a whole Ogham set will be made out of yew. Same goes for runes. My set is made out of ash, but traditionally runes would have been made out of yew, and that's because this is the tree of psychic power, and you would learn knowledge, or you get knowledge about divination from the ancestors and from the spirit realm, and because of this tree's connection with the other side, um, you would make divination tools out of yew traditionally. Um,
Long ago, long, long ago, it was known that connecting the three worlds of the underworld, this middle world of men and women and giants, and the upper world of the gods, was a great tree. And this was a yew tree. Now, one day, Odin the All-Father was sat in Asgard, the heavens, and his two ravens that were his eyes and ears on the realms of men and giants, they were coming back to him with bad tidings. Trouble was brewing down on earth, the rumblings of war, ill omen. Odin knew that hardship was coming long in the future, and he needed knowledge, power, and wisdom to give the gods the best possible chance in the battles and wars to come. So Odin did this. He took off his winged helmet, his golden armor, his great spear he laid down, and he wandered over the rainbow bridge down to earth as Woden the Wanderer. He wore a grey cloak around him, a wide-brimmed hat. He had a long beard, and he carried an old staff, so that he appeared to humans just like an old wandering man. And for a long time he wandered across Midgard, across the realms of men, and he was often taken into little homesteads or farms. That's why these days it's always important to show hospitality to strangers, just in case they're a god in disguise. Now, for a long time Odin wandered, and eventually he came to a great river. This is the river that separates the realm of men from the realm of the ice giants. Huge river, as wide as a sea. You can barely see across it. Great chunks of ice floating in it in the far, far north. Well, Odin, he waded across this river. Now, when Odin reached the realm of giants, he appeared just as a giant. Just as in the realm of men, he appeared just like a man. And Odin met many of the giants, and many were very, very kind to him. Odin had a certain way with strangers. Now, one day, Odin was wandering along these frozen wastes of the realm of the giants when he came across a huge giant riding a giant red stag with big antlers. And this giant was very old. He had a long silver beard that trailed behind him as he rode across the tundra. This giant dismounted when he saw this wanderer, and they had conversation. And Odin said he was on his way to look for Mimir's well, the well of memory. And the giant said, ho, 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 ho. Well, let's play a little game. I will ask you 3 questions, and if you can't answer any of them, I will cut off your head. If you can answer them, I will tell you the way to Mimir's well, where you are looking for. Odin said, very well, and this giant asked him, first of all, what is the name of the river that separates the realm of gods, of giants and men? Odin told him, and the giant thought, very strange. Only the wisest of the giants know that. But it's not completely unreasonable that this giant might know the name of the river that separates the realm of giants and men. So he asked his next question, what is the name of the serpent that rings around the great cosmic sea surrounding all the world? And Odin knew the name, and the giant thought this was very, very strange indeed. I am the only giant that knows this. There is something about this wanderer, this stranger, that is not what it seems. And he asked his third and final question, what is the name of the plain where at the end of time the great battle will be fought between gods and giants? And it is 100 miles wide and 100 miles long, and Odin told him the name of that place. And at this point, the giant was really starting to suspect something, and Odin said, it is now my turn. What were the last words that Odin, the All-Father, told to his son, Balder the Light? And the giant said, only Odin would know that. Greetings, Odin, All-Father, said the giant. Well, I've won the competition, said Odin. Your head, or tell me the way to Mimir's well. Well, let me keep my head, Odin All-Father, said this giant. I will tell you the way to Mimir's well. That way, over the mountains, over the snow-capped mountains, to the very center of the world, you will find the roots of the World Tree Yggdrassil. And there are many, many, many doors leading down beneath the roots. You must take this door and lead down, down, down into the underworld. There you will find Mimir, whose name means the rememberer, and his well. And in that well is contained all knowledge. But beware, Odin, All-Father, the price for that knowledge is extremely high. Duly noted, said Odin, and he thanked the giant and went on his way, further than he had ever been, through blizzards, over mountains, through wastelands, until you reached the very center, the axis mundi of the entire cosmos, the whole 9 worlds, this vast Yew Tree Yggdrassil, as old, older than time itself. The whole fabric of the cosmos hangs on its roots and branches, and there he found the right doorway between the roots into the center and went down, down, down into the root, into the darkness, and there, sure enough, was an old man or god or giant. No one knows what or who Mimir is, but his name means memory itself, and he guarded the well, and he said, greetings, Odin All-Father, I knew you day, obviously, because Mimir drinks every day from that well of all knowledge, that cauldron of knowledge. And Odin says, I would have a draught from your well of knowledge, Mimir. And Mimir said, the price is your eye. And without hesitation, without any hesitation at all, Odin plucked out his own eye, threw it into the inky depths of that well, and it rippled out, and his eye just sank down into the darkness, looking up. And who knows where that eye is now? And Mimir nodded and gave Odin a drink from that well, and Odin drank, and his mind expanded. He saw everything. He saw all the sorrows of mankind. He saw the great beginning way back before he even existed, way back in the yawning gap of time. He saw how the end of days would be. He saw the great battle of gods and men and giants. He saw the great wolf Fenrir swallowing up the sun at the end of days. He saw the new beginnings. He saw everything. And he saw that his own knowledge, his own power, his own wisdom was not enough. He needed more. He needed to travel down, deeper down into the very root of time, the very darkness of the underworld, beyond the well of Mimir to the well of Urd. And this one was guarded by three women, three strange beings, three Norns. One was old, and older than the old. One was young, and one was concealed in darkness. And these are the three fates that decide the length of life and the passage of fate for every being, whether they are a god or a giant or a dwarf or a man or a woman, everything. They decide everything, and they write it in the runes at the root of the World Tree, and they travel up that great Yew Tree to all the cosmos, and everything is as they inscribe it with these runes of power. And Odin knew that he needed the power of those runes if he was to have any chance of defeating the giants at the end of time. So Odin travelled further down to the well of Urd, where all the roots of the World Tree Yggdrassil converge in this great, deep well of all wisdom and power, where everything wells up from. And the three Norns, they of course knew he was coming and said, welcome, Odin, All-Father. You want the runes of power? Well, the price, the sacrifice is this. You must sacrifice yourself by killing yourself with your own spear and hanging yourself for 9 days on the branches of the World Tree. You must sacrifice yourself to Odin, the All-Father. Yeah, Odin had to sacrifice himself to himself for knowledge, and he did it. He strung himself up on the branches of the great Yew Tree, and he stabbed himself with his own spear and cast it down, and he forbade any god or mortal to give him any drink or any help whatsoever. And for 9 days and 9 nights he hung on the edge of death. In fact, he did die. He did die. And then on the 9th night he gazed down, and he saw coming up from the surface of the well of Urd the runes, all of the runes which contain all of the magical power in the entire cosmos. And then he screamed and fell back from that place, but he had the runes of power in his hand. So that is the story of how Odin sacrificed himself to himself for knowledge, and the perfect story to illustrate how the Yew Tree symbolizes a journey into the underworld and back again, returning with knowledge